We're happy to learn and hear from Dr. Goff, my dog, today. Welcome to Marketing for the Now, Dr. Goff.
How you doing, man?
Man, good to see you, first and foremost. And I know Gary's got a couple questions, but let me start, if you don't mind.
I don't.
Let's start with your job versus your side hustle. Because it seems like your side hustle ain't really a side. It's like your job, when your job and your side hustle are going neck and neck, which one is really the side hustle, Dr. Goff? So talk to us a little bit about what happens at John Jay, and then talk to us a little bit about what happens over at CPE.
Well, first I got a little bit of news on the John Jay gig. That John Jay gig as of today is no more.
I like the hands. It's like
he's talking about Alabama, and like I'm from Philly, so like I just keep the Philly hustle together. This is so anyway, the John Jay gig is no more. I am so sad to say goodbye to my folks there, but I am now a full endowed professor at Yale University. So I needed to go up to New Haven because the pizza to upgrade. I need to level up on my pizza game. But so there is the jobby job, which is being a professor, and then there is the side hustle, which is being CEO of the Center for Policing Equity, and they are secretly the same gig. So the way that came about is that when you are an individual professor, you get respect, you publish papers, people are like, oh, this dude's legit. Like I talk like I'm from Philly, but my paper looks like I came from Harvard and Stanford because I did. And that's a good look. But there is no way I, as an individual, can do anything remotely on the scale of what's needed on race and policing as like Negro from Philadelphia. That is not going to cut it. So about 13, 14 years ago, somebody said, you need to institutionalize yourself. So I put something together on like a little trifold pamphlet. I brought it to a bunch of police chiefs. I was like, would you like my pamphlet? Would you like to know what I could do for you? I do math real good. I talk pretty. Could I help you out? And so that's where the Center for Policing Equity came from, a collaboration with a deputy chief in Denver who was like, I need someone to come in and do some real work out in the streets with some science. Don't be trying to sell your body. This is not going to sell for much. I need that science to come with a serious racial lens and with rigorous statistics. So the Center for Policing Equity is an outgrowth of the research that I do as a professor, but it allows me to do more than just publish in journals that like 3 people read. We can actually give our science directly back to communities and directly back to police chiefs so that they can hold themselves accountable to their values. And we're not used to talking about stats and values, but I mean, if we're going to be talking in a business context, if you measure what matters, in policing, we've always measured crime, but we haven't measured justice. We measure justice, we give that back to communities, and to do that at scale, I needed to have a side hustle.
Okay, so then from the marketing aspect of that then, you were able to, you almost in a way, you went to these police departments one by one and said, hey, I can help you be better at your job with this data. For that to work, the customer has to trust the data. So when we talk about policing in this climate now, with everything from Breonna Taylor to George Floyd, I don't have to tell you, you know all of the statistics with that. How do you convince a police department that now is a better time? Because I imagine not every police department said yes to science or yes to the data. So what is the process in convincing people that this is something they need, that may show them that there's something wrong with it? It's almost the opposite of beauty, where something's going to show you and make you look prettier. Your data comes in and goes, no, here's where your pimples are.
I mean, they're not pimples so much as there are gaping, sucking chest wounds. But yeah, it's the general area. Like these aren't blemishes on the almost perfect skin of American democracy.
Doctor, when you're 14 in high school, a pimple feels like a gashing hole in your body.
I understand that, right? Which is why you're not supposed to like pluck at it and do whatever. But America's older than 14, and these wounds are a little bit deeper than that.
Yes,
so one of the first misconceptions I got to clear up for folks who hear about what I do, I'm like, oh, you're a black dude from Philly who studies racism, and then you work in police departments. You must be suing them all the time. So I got to tell you, growing up in Philly as I did, I never thought this would be my world. But police chiefs are climbing over themselves trying to get access to the services. We got a backlog of 250 plus departments that are just asking to get in.
Doctor, how many, you have a really interesting question on that, because this is what I've been thinking about probably the most out of the last 8 to 12 weeks. And this is just, I'd love to hear it, and I can see how you roll, so I'm excited to get the answer. Of those 250, how many do you think are checking the box because it's optically right, versus how many do you feel are deep in it? And just, and I know it's a tougher, I'm just genuinely curious, and not that, and at some level, it's almost like political correctness, like checking the box. I don't even want to demonize that. I'm just genuinely curious, because I knew your answer was going to be they're climbing over themselves, because this is what I see in the business world right now. Mm-hmm. But what I'm curious about is that.
Yeah, and so we get like 3 categories of folks that come to holler at us, right? The first is like, yo, it's racism. I need some help. And those are those folks that you point at your heart. Those folks really believe. Those are my favorite chiefs to work with. And that is the majority of them. Like, yo, we got something, we got to do it right. Then we got some folks who are like, this mess. I know we're not racist. Everybody else is racist, not us. But what you're gonna do? You're gonna come in, and I'm so confident that I dare you to show me where I'm racist, right? And you know what? We can work just well with them too. I'm like, okay, so tell me all the ways you know you're not racist. They're like, well, we go where the crime goes. Check. All right, we're gonna look at that. Well, it's all poverty. Check. We're gonna look at that. It's like, well, the school systems are trash. I believe you. We're gonna look at that. And then when we do our analyses, what we're doing is we're not giving back to them like, oh, black people are 4 times more likely to get beat up in your city, which is true. But that is literally the correlation fallacy, right? You can't tell me how much of that is because of what police do as opposed to crime and poverty and schools and employment and healthcare, which all happens before any police stop. So what we give back is the portion of those disparities that belong to police. We give back to them their behaviors and their policies.
That's where the I'm good at math kicks in.
Yeah, that's where the math is what's up, right? So I give that back to them.
What's the third group?
But that third category is exactly what you're talking just about. They're like, oh, so they did that in the county over there. I guess we're going to do it too. So yeah, come on. Those are actually the ones where like, yeah, it's like, I know that you think that we just off the shelf. We don't do like that. We bespoke, right? We're Neiman Marcus, we in Walmart. Not that there's anything wrong with either the business models, but we don't have capacity to do what because I tell you, 4 or 5 years ago, it used to take 3 PhD students. I used to chop off their eyelids, put them in a cage and be like, you clean data until you're done. 9 to 24 months later, they come out with 1 department's data cleaned.
Jeez.
So in 2016, when democracy ended, we got Google to come in and give us a bunch of engineers, and they built us some software. And that software, instead of going 9 to 24 months, we go 9 to 12 hours. Like we're inside of a day, and most departments we can do under 2 hours to clean their data, where it used to take us 1 year to 2 years. So now we're at the point where we can go to scale, and we can not only just give it back to, we're starting to clear out that backlog, we can now start to give back to folks at a cadence. So like they're not just getting it once every couple of years, they're getting it once every couple of months. Exactly. Right. So you're measuring the change in addition to the baseline. That's the goal. Because if you really care about something, you don't just measure it once. You start doing it regularly and holding yourself accountable to it.
Okay, so then to that point, then what can business leaders learn from that? In the sense, is it harder to change systemic issues within your organization, or is it tougher to maintain a non-systemic environment? Is it easier to get well, or is it easier to stay healthy?
Yeah, and it's really going to depend on the market and the industry and the individual organization. But I'll tell you, like, there's an example from industry that we use all the time in Salesforce, right? So in Salesforce, they came through and someone was like, I think we might be paying women less than men. And Mark Benioff, with his infinite wisdom, was like, no way. But they decided they were going to measure it. And lo and behold, they were paying women less for doing the same job. Like, oh shit, well, we got to do this better. So they equalize pay. And then a woman comes back later, is like, hey, Mark, let's do this again a year later. He's like, no way, we definitely don't need to do that. We already fixed it. So they measured again a year later. And you know what? The same gap that came the year before was already back. Because in that year, they had acquired a bunch of companies that had the same gap that all of Silicon Valley has on gender disparity. So they're like, oh, you mean if we care about this, we got to measure it regularly and adjust to it regularly, like everything else that we care about?
You know what's funny about that? I talk to a lot of people in business about that. I'm like, you do look at your financial statement every month, right? Or when you try to get into another analogy, I'm like, you mean like that time you lost 20 pounds for your wedding, but then a year later it was all back +3? You know, like this thought of like, do it once and go to sleep because you did it is just, there is no, you know, to me, that's the tell that you're checking a box versus it's your actual truth. You know, I've been having a lot of conversations internally, externally. I'm an investor in 84 businesses, and the reality is I'm trying to get people to understand, like, however you think about anything, I'm not even imposing my own points of view on the world on you, but recognize there are things that you check on constantly. For example, I believe in, you know, the atmosphere, the energy, that general net happiness of my employees. So when I get a new admin, inevitably they're like, man, you spend a lot of time on one-to-one meetings with employees. You know, smart ones with a little courage, they're like, should HR do more of that? Or can we put more people in those meetings? And I'm like, no, this is what I think is actually the variable for the success of our business. Like I genuinely believe this 15 minutes with Tasha or Rick or Sally Pants McGee is an ROI positive thing in my actions. So I think it's very important, because I know a lot of business people are watching right now. You're not gonna go 2 years not looking at your bank statement, because you value it. So if you value anything, D&I, innovation, you know, I value innovation. My CFO gets mad at me all the time because I'm spending money on something new that will not return money this year, but that's because I value innovation, and so if you value this issue, which I think is ROI business positive, by the way.
Yeah.
One of the things I try to do, Doctor, I don't know, you know, is like make it selfish to be selfless. This is actually good for your business. Forget about that. You're gonna have to talk to your grandkids about this one day and talk about what kind of human you are. Forget about that. This is just good for your business. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's 1,000%. The thing I want to do to be generous to folks is part of the reason that people don't sort of click on, well, what do the numbers look like, is because in general, across society, we've defined this problem as a hearts and minds thing, right? We've defined it as internal to individuals. And so if you don't have a defective heart and don't have a defective mind, you can't be racist and problem solve. So people put out statements, but they don't actually track behaviors. Let me be really clear. Over the last couple of months, you have not seen a single person in the streets being, what do we want? White people to feel differently about us. That has never happened once in the history of Black America, because it's about behaviors. And once you get that we're talking about race and equity, it's about behaviors. Like, oh, I measure behaviors all the damn time. So we can start by changing the definition, and then we go back to measuring behaviors. And once we're at measuring behaviors, businesses should know how to keep up with that, for sure.
So then what can businesses that are trying to police their own biases within their organization, what can they learn from your work? Like, what can they take away? Because I believe that in this climate now, businesses aren't just judged by their products, they judge on how much they care and have concern about their fellow man. So what can they learn from you?
So I think there's two sort of highline takeaways beyond the measure this stuff that matters and this stuff matters. One is work backwards from the problem. And I say, when I talk to corporates, a lot of times, like, they think that the problem is just numbers. I can tell you that there's a reason why the inclusion came after diversity, and we're gonna talk about justice and freedom later, because that's about power, right? Talk to the folks who are there in a space where they can actually say something, or bring somebody else in that they can say something to, so you can hear what the actual issues are within your organization, work backwards from that, because those are the measurables that you want. But the other piece is exactly what you said, right? Policing right now has a whole bunch of problems. Public safety has a whole bunch of problems. Among them, though, is a brand problem, right? Who the heck trusts that police are going to show up and do the right thing for vulnerable folks? Like, who thinks that when you see a video of policing, that you're like, oh, something good's about to happen. A baby's about to get saved, right? A family on welfare is about to find employment and they're going to get the better education and come up. That's not what's happening. The brand is contaminated by the historical choices of the industry. That's not just policing, y'all. So if you care about the long-term future, if you're going to invest in innovation, invest in the brand. And the brand has to be positively aligned with basic social values. That doesn't mean that you need to have police abolition as one of your core tenets for market success, but it does absolutely mean that you should show up in the anti-racist column. Like, that's a fairly basic element, that racism bad, Nazism bad, should be associated with your brand. And if it's not, you better look at what choices you made that got you there, because brands don't happen overnight.
Well,
that's right.
He is Dr. Phillip Goff, now a professor
Fantastic.
of Yale. Congratulations. And the Center for Policing Equity. Thank you, good sir, for coming on Marketing for the Now.
Always good talking to y'all.
Take care.